The radio crackled to life at 11:47 p.m., piercing through Detective Sarah Martinez's third cup of coffee. Unit 47, Domestic Disturbance, Possible Assault, 2847 Maple Creek Drive. She'd been working Phoenix PD for 12 years, but something in the dispatcher's voice made her stomach clench. The address rang familiar. She'd been to this suburban neighborhood before for noise complaints and minor disputes, but never for anything serious. Sarah's patrol car cut through the desert night, emergency lights painting the quiet residential street in alternating red and blue. The Williams house stood like a wound against the darkness, every window blazing with light, while neighbors huddled on their porches, whispering behind cupped hands. An ambulance sat in the driveway, its back doors flung wide, paramedics working frantically over a stretcher. The front door hung askew on its hinges, splintered wood scattered across the welcome mat that cheerfully proclaimed, "Home sweet home." Sarah stepped inside and immediately understood why dispatch had sounded shaken. The living room looked like a war zone. A coffee table lay overturned, its glass surface shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces that caught the overhead light. Like deadly diamonds. Dark stains unmistakably blood-splattered, the cream-colored walls in abstract patterns that told a story of violence no one should ever have to read. A child's drawing was stuck to the refrigerator with colorful magnets, depicting a stick-figure family holding hands under a smiling sun. The innocent artwork seemed obscene against the backdrop of destruction, a cruel reminder of what this home was supposed to be. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, showing happier times. Marcus Williams grinning at company barbecues, Jessica Williams laughing at birthday parties, and between them always, a cherubic little girl with pigtails and gap-toothed smiles. That same little girl now sat frozen in the corner like a broken doll, her small body pressed against the wall as if she could disappear into the paint. Emma Williams, just 3 years old, according to her birth certificate, clutched a brown teddy bear so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The bear was missing one button eye, and its fur was matted with what Sarah prayed was just chocolate, not blood. Emma's vacant eyes stared at something only she could see, somewhere far beyond the chaos of the living room. She hadn't blinked since Sarah arrived, hadn't moved, hadn't made a single sound despite the parade of uniformed officers, paramedics, and crime scene technicians trampling through her violated sanctuary. It was as if the trauma had stolen not just her voice, but her very presence from the world. "Jesus Christ," whispered Officer Mike Chun, Sarah's partner for the past 5 years. He'd seen everything the job could throw at him: gang shootings, drug overdoses, vehicular homicides, but the sight of the motionless child in the corner seemed to crack something inside his professional armor. "How long has she been like this?" "Since we arrived," replied Officer Janet Rodriguez, the first responder who'd taken the neighbor's frantic call. Mrs. Peterson next door heard screaming around 10:30, then sudden silence. When she looked out her window, she saw Marcus Williams carrying what looked like an unconscious body to his car. He came back alone 20 minutes later. Sarah knelt, slowly beside Emma, her heart breaking at the child's hollow expression. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice gentle as a prayer. "I'm Sarah. I'm here to help." Emma's gaze didn't shift, didn't acknowledge Sarah's presence. It was like trying to communicate with a ghost. From the kitchen came the sound of Marcus Williams's voice, loud and indignant. "This is insane. I keep telling you people Jessica fell down the stairs. I found her unconscious when I got home from work." His voice carried the rehearsed quality of someone who'd practiced their story, polished it until it gleamed with false sincerity. Marcus Williams was a big man, 6'3" with hands like hammers, and a face that could shift from charming to menacing in the space of a heartbeat. He worked construction, which explained the powerful build, and the collection of tools that investigators were now photographing as potential weapons. His story was simple. He'd been at Murphy's bar with coworkers until 10:15, had surveillance footage to prove it, then came home to find his wife at the bottom of the stairs. But the evidence screamed a different truth. The blood spatter patterns were wrong for a fall. The defensive wounds on Jessica's hands spoke of a fight. The neighbor's testimony about the screaming, the sounds of breaking glass, the sight of Marcus carrying his wife's limp body, it all painted a picture of domestic violence escalated to attempted murder. "Where's the mother?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "St. Joseph's Hospital, critical condition," Officer Rodriguez replied grimly. "Skull fracture, 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding. Doctor said if she'd been found an hour later ... She left the sentence hanging, but Sarah understood. Jessica Williams was fighting for her life, while her husband maintained his innocence and their daughter remained trapped in traumatic silence. Sarah looked back at Emma, this tiny witness to unspeakable horror. The little girl held the key to justice in her traumatized mind, but trauma had built walls too high for traditional methods to breach. Without Emma's testimony, Marcus Williams would likely walk free. His alibi, while suspicious in timing, was solid. The physical evidence was compelling but circumstantial. A good defense lawyer could create reasonable doubt. The crime scene photographer's flash illuminated the room in stark bursts, each pop of light revealing new details of the violence that had shattered this family. In the corner, Emma Williams remained motionless, the only living witness to her father's crime, holding secrets in her silence that could either free a monster or deliver justice. Sarah stood slowly, her knees creaking from years of police work, and made a silent promise to the broken child in the corner. Somehow, someway, she would find Emma's voice and make sure the truth was heard. 3 weeks after the nightmare on Maple Creek Drive, District Attorney Lisa Hendricks sat in her corner office, watching the Phoenix skyline shimmer in the brutal Arizona heat. The Williams case file lay open on her mahogany desk like an accusation, its pages filled with damning evidence that seemed to mock her growing frustration. Physical evidence pointed to Marcus Williams like a neon arrow, but without Emma's testimony, it was all circumstantial. And Emma Williams remained as silent as a tomb. The morning sun cast long shadows across crime scene photographs that told their own horrific story. Blood spatter analysis confirmed the violence hadn't occurred at the bottom of any staircase. Jessica Williams's defensive wounds spoke of a desperate fight for survival. The timeline of Marcus's movements had suspicious gaps that his expensive legal team couldn't quite explain away. Yet Brennan and Associates, the most ruthless defense firm in Arizona, had already begun their character assassination of the victim, while painting their client as a grieving husband whose wife was prone to accidents. Lisa's intercom buzzed, interrupting her brooding. "Dr. Chun is here for your 10 a.m. appointment," announced her secretary, Margaret, whose voice carried the weight of 30 years, witnessing the justice system's failures and occasional triumphs. Dr. Amanda Chun entered with the exhausted bearing of someone who'd spent weeks trying to unlock the mind of a traumatized child. As the state's leading expert in pediatric psychology and child witness preparation, she'd worked miracles before coaxing testimony from children who'd witnessed gang violence, sexual abuse, and family murders. But Emma Williams presented a challenge that seemed insurmountable. "Any progress?" Lisa asked, though Dr. Chun's slumped shoulders already provided the answer. "She's physically healthy," Dr. Chun began, settling into the leather chair across from Lisa's desk. "Eating properly. Sleeping through the night in her foster placement. Mrs. Davidson is wonderful with her. But psychologically, ... She shook her head, pulling out a tablet filled with session notes. "Emma exhibits classic symptoms of severe PTSD, dissociative episodes, selective mutism, hypervigilance. I've tried every technique in my arsenal play. Therapy, art therapy, sand tray therapy, even EMDR adapted for her age group. Nothing breaks through. Lisa leaned back, feeling the weight of impending failure. What about the dolls? The anatomically correct ones you use for abuse cases? She won't touch them. Won't even look at them. Yesterday, I brought in a dollhouse similar to her family's layout, thinking she might act out the scene. She had a complete shutdown, stopped responding entirely for 2 hours. Dr. Chun's voice carried the professional distance she maintained. But Lisa caught the underlying frustration. Lisa, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never encountered a child so completely locked away from the world. Through the office window, Lisa could see reporters still camped outside the courthouse. The Williams case had captured media attention nationwide, becoming a symbol of domestic violence and the challenges of prosecuting abusers who maintained their innocence. Women's advocacy groups held daily vigils for Jessica Williams, who remained in a medically induced coma at St. Joseph's Hospital. Meanwhile, Marcus Williams had been released on bond, his construction company colleagues providing character references that painted him as a devoted family man incapable of violence. Michael Brennan called again this morning, Lisa said, referring to Marcus's lead attorney. He's filing another motion to dismiss. Claims were traumatizing his client with a baseless prosecution. The judge is getting impatient, and frankly, so is the mayor's office. This case is costing the city a fortune in overtime and security. Dr. Chun scrolled through her notes on the tablet. I've consulted with colleagues across the country. Dr. Susan Walsh at Johns Hopkins suggested hypnotherapy, but Emma's too young and too dissociated. Dr. Richard Martinez in Los Angeles recommended a psychiatric evaluation for medication. But that could take months and might further traumatize her. The office fell silent, except for the hum of air conditioning fighting against the desert heat. Lisa stared at a framed photo on her desk, showing her own daughter at age 3, gap-toothed and grinning after a successful day at the zoo. The contrast with Emma's hollow-eyed silence was heartbreaking. There has to be something, Lisa muttered, more to herself than to Dr. Chun. Some way to reach her. What about? She stopped mid-sentence, struck by a memory from a legal conference she'd attended in Denver 6 months earlier. A prosecutor from Colorado had presented a case study that seemed impossible at the time. What is it? Dr. Chun asked, noting the sudden change in Lisa's expression. I remember reading something. There was a presentation about alternative methods for child witnesses. Something about therapy animals. Lisa began rifling through files on her desk, looking for the conference materials she'd filed away and forgotten. A police department somewhere was using dogs to help traumatized children testify. Dr. Chun's eyebrows raised. Animal-assisted therapy is well documented for PTSD treatment, but I've never heard of using it specifically for witness preparation. The legal challenges alone would be enormous, Lisa finished, but we're already facing an impossible situation. She found the folder she'd been searching for, thick with conference proceedings and case studies. Here it is, Officer Jake Rodriguez from the Phoenix PD K-9 unit. He's been working with a German Shepherd trained in trauma response. Phoenix PD has a program like that? Apparently, it's experimental. Rodriguez has been working with the university's psychology department on some kind of pilot program. Lisa's voice gained energy as she read. Says here they've had success with children who couldn't testify through traditional methods. Dr. Chun looked skeptical. Lisa, even if this works, and that's a massive if, can you imagine the legal precedent? Defense attorneys would claim we're manipulating the jury with emotional appeals. The appeals court would what? Overturn a conviction that saved a child's life and put a violent man behind bars? Lisa stood and walked to her window, watching the protesters below, holding signs demanding justice for Jessica Williams. Amanda, we're out of options. Traditional therapy isn't working. The physical evidence won't convict without witness testimony. In 2 weeks, Brennan's going to get his dismissal, and Marcus Williams is going to walk free. She turned back to face Dr. Chun, decision crystallizing in her mind. What do we have to lose? If this dog therapy doesn't work, we're exactly where we are now, nowhere. But if it does work, if it works, we might actually reach Emma, Dr. Chun admitted, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial skepticism. And if we can reach her, maybe we can help her find her voice. Lisa reached for her phone. I'm calling Rodriguez. It's time to try something that's never been done before. Outside, the Arizona sun climbed higher, and somewhere across the city, a little girl sat in silent trauma while a specially trained German shepherd waited to change both their lives forever. The Arizona Children's Advocacy Center stood like a beacon of hope on East McDowell Road, its cheerful yellow walls and playground equipment designed to create a safe haven for the state's most vulnerable witnesses. But as Officer Jake Rodriguez guided Rex through the center's security doors on that sweltering Tuesday morning, he wondered if even this specially trained German shepherd could reach a child who had retreated so far into herself that she seemed more ghost than little girl. Rex padded silently beside Jake through the center's carpeted hallways, his specially fitted therapy vest marking him as more than just a police K-9. At 4 years old, the gentle giant had been selected from hundreds of candidates for the experimental trauma response program developed jointly by Phoenix PD and Arizona State University's psychology department. His training had been rigorous 18 months of specialized conditioning to remain calm under extreme stress, to read human emotions with uncanny accuracy, and to provide comfort without overwhelming vulnerable children. Dr. Amanda Chun waited in the observation room, her tablet ready to document what she privately feared would be another failed attempt. Through the one-way mirror, she watched Emma Williams sit in her usual position, curled in the corner chair of the play therapy room, clutching her one-eyed teddy bear, staring at nothing with those haunting vacant eyes that had become all too familiar over the past 3 weeks. She hasn't moved from that spot since we arrived an hour ago, whispered Sarah Davidson, Emma's foster mother, a woman whose own children had grown and left home, making space in her heart for the damaged children the system couldn't place elsewhere. This morning, she ate half a bowl of cereal and drew a single black line on a piece of paper. That's the most interaction I've gotten from her in days. Jake studied Emma through the glass, noting the rigid posture, the shallow breathing, the way her small fingers gripped the teddy bear like a lifeline to reality. He'd seen children in various stages of trauma, but Emma's complete withdrawal suggested psychological wounds that ran deeper than most. Rex seemed to sense his handlers' concern, pressing closer against Jake's leg in that intuitive way that made him such an exceptional therapy animal. Remember, Dr. Chun said quietly, we're not trying to force interaction. The goal is simply to observe whether Rex's presence creates any measurable change in her stress indicators. She gestured to the monitoring equipment that would track Emma's heart rate, breathing patterns, and cortisol levels. If we see even minor improvements in her physiological responses, it might indicate she's capable of forming new emotional connections. Jake nodded, adjusting Rex's therapy vest one final time. He knows what he's doing. Rex has worked with 47 children in the past 18 months. Not all successes, but he's never made a situation worse. He paused at the therapy room door, looking back at the team assembled behind the mirror. Give us space. No sudden movements, no talking. Let Rex work his magic. The therapy room had been carefully designed to feel more like a living room than a clinical space. Soft couches, formed conversation circles around low tables covered with art supplies, books, and toys. Gentle lighting filtered through gauzy curtains, and the walls displayed children's artwork, bright, hopeful images that stood in stark contrast to Emma's current emotional landscape. Rex entered the room like liquid calm, his movements fluid and purposeful, yet utterly non-threatening. Jake remained near the door, becoming as invisible as possible while maintaining control of his partner. The German Shepherd's intelligent brown eyes immediately located Emma in her corner chair, but rather than approach directly, he moved to the center of the room and simply lay down, positioning himself where she could see him without feeling cornered. For long minutes, nothing happened. Emma's gaze remained fixed on some invisible point beyond the window, her breathing shallow and mechanical. Rex lay perfectly still, his head resting on his front paws, occasionally shifting his ears at distant sounds, but never taking his attention completely away from the traumatized child. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emma's breathing pattern changed. Dr. Chun noticed it first on the monitors, a slight deepening, a marginal decrease in heart rate. Rex's ears perked forward, as if he too had detected the shift, but he remained motionless, allowing Emma to process his presence at her own pace. 20 minutes passed in near silence. Sarah Davidson shifted nervously behind the mirror, unused to such patience in a world that demanded immediate results. Dr. Chun made careful notes, documenting every microchange in Emma's physiological responses. Jake remained a statue by the door, trusting Rex's instincts completely. The breakthrough came so subtly that Sarah almost missed it. Emma's head turned not toward Rex, but toward the window where a bird had landed on the sill. It was the first voluntary movement she'd made since entering the room. Rex lifted his head slightly, following her gaze, and for just a moment, girl and dog looked at the same thing. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, pressing closer to the observation window. "Shared attention," Dr. Chun breathed, her pen flying across her notepad. "She's responding to environmental stimuli again. That's the first sign we've seen of her, connecting with the outside world." Rex rose slowly, stretching in the way dogs do when they've been lying still for too long. He padded to the window, not approaching Emma directly, but positioning himself where he could see both the bird and the little girl. His tail gave a single gentle wag, not the excited bouncing of a playful dog, but the calm acknowledgement of a professional at work. Emma's fingers loosened slightly on her teddy bear. Her eyes, still hollow but no longer completely vacant, tracked Rex's movement to the window. For the first time in weeks, she seemed to be truly seeing something in a present moment rather than lost in the nightmare of her memories. The bird flew away, but Emma continued to watch the window. Rex lowered himself to the floor again, this time closer to her chair, but still maintaining respectful distance. He rested his chin on his paws and simply existed in her space, a warm, breathing presence that asked nothing but offered everything. Another 30 minutes passed before Emma made her next move. Her left hand, the one not clutching the teddy bear, slowly extended toward Rex. She didn't touch him. The distance was still too great, but the gesture was unmistakable. She was reaching out. "My God," Dr. Chun whispered, her professional composure finally cracking. "She's trying to connect." Rex's tail wagged once, acknowledging her attempt. His eyes met hers across the room, and something passed between them, a understanding that transcended species, a recognition of shared existence in a world that could be both beautiful and terrible. Emma's lips moved, forming soundless words that only Rex's sensitive ears might catch. Her first attempt at communication in 3 weeks, whispered to a dog who somehow understood that healing sometimes begins with the simple knowledge that you're not alone. Judge Robert Thompson's chambers had witnessed 30 years of legal battles, but nothing quite like the circus erupting before him on this scorching Phoenix afternoon. The mahogany-paneled room, usually a sanctuary of quiet deliberation, now crackled with tension as opposing counsel faced off over what legal scholars would later call the most groundbreaking courtroom accommodation request in Arizona history. Michael Brennan, senior partner at Brennan and Associates, paced before the judge's desk like a caged predator, his $1,000 suit wrinkled from 3 hours of heated argument. Your Honor, this is nothing short of legal theater designed to manipulate a jury's emotions. A therapy dog in a criminal courtroom? What's next? Emotional support peacocks? Comfort llamas? His voice dripped sarcasm, but underneath lay genuine concern. In his 25 years of criminal defense, he'd built his reputation on meticulous preparation and precedent-based arguments. This case threatened to shatter everything he understood about courtroom procedure. Across the room, District Attorney Lisa Hendricks maintained her composure despite the magnitude of what she was requesting. Her legal brief, 3 inches thick with supporting documentation from 12 states, lay open before Judge Thompson. Your Honor, the precedent exists. Washington State, Colorado, and California have all successfully incorporated therapy animals in proceedings involving child witnesses. The Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed that reasonable accommodations must be made to ensure children can testify safely and effectively. Judge Thompson, a veteran of the bench who'd seen legal evolution from death penalty debates to DNA evidence acceptance, removed his reading glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. At 62, he'd planned to retire quietly, perhaps write his memoirs about 3 decades of jurisprudence. Instead, he found himself potentially making constitutional history with a decision that would either revolutionize children's rights or open the floodgates to courtroom chaos. Ms. Hendricks, Judge Thompson said carefully, your brief cites 17 cases involving therapy animals, but none in homicide proceedings. The emotional weight of this case, combined with the unprecedented nature of your request. He gestured toward the stack of legal challenges Brennan had filed. Mr. Brennan raises valid concerns about prejudicial impact. Outside the courthouse, the media circus had reached carnival proportions. News vans from CNN, Fox, ABC, and every major network lined Jefferson Street, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like mechanical flowers seeking digital sun. Legal analysts debated on live television, while protesters on both sides held signs reading "Justice for Jessica" and "Fair Trial Rights." The courthouse steps had become a stage where legal experts pontificated about everything from animal rights to constitutional interpretation. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a constitutional law professor at Arizona State University, stood before a bank of microphones explaining the broader implications. What Judge Thompson decides today doesn't just affect this case. It could fundamentally alter how we accommodate vulnerable witnesses in American courtrooms. We're talking about a paradigm shift in access to justice. Inside the chambers, the legal arguments continued with surgical precision. Brennan pulled out case law dating back to the 1800s, citing everything from hearsay rules to due process violations. Your Honor, my client faces life in prison based on the testimony of a 3-year-old child whose mental state is so compromised she hasn't spoken in a month. Now the prosecution wants to parade a dog through the courtroom to elicit sympathy? This violates every principle of fair trial procedure. Lisa fired back with equal intensity, her voice rising with passion. That 3-year-old child is the only witness to a brutal assault that nearly killed her mother. Jessica Williams lies in a hospital bed, may never fully recover, while her attacker walks free on bail. If Rex can help Emma find her voice and tell the truth, then denying that accommodation would be the real violation, a violation of her right to be heard. Judge Thompson had spent the previous week consulting with colleagues across the country, reading law review articles on courtroom innovation, and reviewing videotaped testimony from the few cases where therapy animals had been permitted. The legal landscape was shifting beneath his feet, and he found himself standing at the epicenter of that change. Dr. Chun. Judge Thompson addressed the child psychologist directly. In your professional opinion, is there any other method that might enable this child to testify? Dr. Amanda Chun straightened in her chair, carrying the weight of Emma's future in her response. Your Honor, I've exhausted every traditional intervention. EMDR therapy, play therapy, art therapy, even medication. Consultation. Emma exhibits severe dissociative symptoms, consistent with complex PTSD. In my sessions with Rex present, she's shown the first signs of psychological engagement in over a month. Without this accommodation, I believe she'll remain unable to testify, effectively silencing the only witness to this crime. Brennan jumped on her words. Exactly my point, Your Honor. Dr. Chun admits the child is psychologically compromised. How can we trust testimony from someone in such a fragile mental state? And if a dog's presence is the only thing enabling her to speak, what does that say about the reliability of what she might say? The chambers fell silent, except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of protesters chanting outside. Judge Thompson stared out his window at the Maricopa County Jail, where thousands of defendants had awaited their fate over the decades. Some guilty, some innocent, all deserving of fair trials under the Constitution he'd sworn to uphold. The court will recess for 24 hours, Judge Thompson announced, his voice heavy with the weight of impending decision. I need time to review the constitutional implications and craft a ruling that serves both justice and legal precedent. As the legal teams filed out, the hallways buzzed with speculation. Court reporters updated their social media feeds while sketch artists captured the historic moment. In newsrooms across the country, producers cleared prime time slots for what would either be a revolutionary breakthrough in children's rights or a controversial departure from legal tradition. That evening, Judge Thompson sat alone in his study at home, surrounded by law books and constitutional commentaries. Through his window, he could see the lights of Phoenix stretching toward the horizon, each one representing a citizen whose faith in the justice system depended on his decision. Somewhere in that vast urban landscape, a traumatized little girl waited for her chance to speak truth to power, while a violent man counted on legal technicalities to escape justice. The judge poured himself a glass of bourbon and opened the Constitution to the Sixth Amendment, reading once again the words that guaranteed every defendant the right to confront their accusers. But what happened when the accuser was too traumatized to speak without help? What happened when justice hung in the balance, waiting for a 3-year-old girl and a German shepherd to change legal history forever? Tomorrow, Judge Robert Thompson would render the most important decision of his career, knowing that whatever he chose would echo through courtrooms across America for generations to come. The courthouse clock struck 9 a.m. as Judge Robert Thompson entered his courtroom for what would become the most scrutinized hearing in Arizona legal history. The gallery buzzed with nervous energy as legal observers, journalists, and children's advocates filled every available seat. Court TV had been granted permission to broadcast live, meaning millions of viewers would witness either a groundbreaking moment in jurisprudence or a spectacular legal failure that would haunt the justice system for decades. Emma Williams sat in the witness box, her small frame dwarfed by the imposing oak structure designed for adult testimony. She wore a pale yellow dress chosen by her foster mother, Sarah Davidson, a color that Dr. Amanda Chun had suggested might psychologically evoke feelings of warmth and safety. But despite the careful preparation, Emma remained the same hollow-eyed child who had haunted investigators' dreams for weeks. Her teddy bear sat in her lap, its missing button eye a poignant reminder of the innocence that had been shattered. In her family's living room, beside her, Rex lay in perfect position, his specially fitted therapy vest, identifying him as more than just a police K-9. Officer Jake Rodriguez sat nearby, his hand resting lightly on Rex's leash, not for control, but for connection. The German Shepherd's calm presence seemed to create an invisible bubble of tranquility around Emma, his steady breathing the only sound in the otherwise silent courtroom. Judge Thompson had spent the previous night reviewing constitutional precedents and consulting with judicial colleagues across the country. His decision would either open new pathways for vulnerable witnesses or create a dangerous precedent that defense attorneys would challenge for generations. The weight of legal history pressed down on his shoulders as he prepared to make the ruling that would define his 30-year career. Dr. Chun, Judge Thompson began, his voice carrying the formal gravity of the moment. Please present your findings regarding the defendant's interactions with the therapy animal. Dr. Chun rose from the counsel table, her tablet filled with weeks of meticulous documentation. Your Honor, over the past 14 days, I've conducted 16 sessions with Emma Williams in the presence of Rex. The transformation has been remarkable and scientifically measurable. She approached the bench with a folder of charts and graphs. Emma's cortisol levels, stress hormones, dropped by 60% when Rex was present. Her heart rate stabilized, her breathing patterns normalized, and most significantly, she began demonstrating voluntary communication behaviors. The courtroom listened in rapt attention as Dr. Chun detailed the breakthrough moments. On day 8, Emma whispered her first words in over a month, not to me, but to Rex. On day 12, she made sustained eye contact with another human being for the first time since the trauma. Yesterday, she actually smiled when Rex performed. A simple command. Michael Brennan shifted uncomfortably at the defense table, his legal pad covered with objections. He longed to voice, but couldn't interrupt during the scientific presentation. His client, Marcus Williams, sat stone-faced beside him, the picture of a grieving husband wrongly accused. But those who knew the signs could see the calculation behind his eyes, the way he assessed every word for potential threats to his carefully constructed innocence. Dr. Chun, Judge Thompson continued, in your professional opinion, would Emma be capable of testifying truthfully about traumatic events while Rex is present? Yes, Your Honor. The research is clear. Children who feel psychologically safe are more likely to provide accurate testimony. Rex doesn't influence what Emma remembers. He simply creates the emotional security necessary for her to access and verbalize those memories. Officer Rodriguez was called next, his uniform crisp and his demeanor professional despite the unprecedented nature of his testimony. Your Honor, Rex has been trained specifically for courtroom environments. He won't react to loud voices, sudden movements, or emotional outbursts. His presence is calming, not disruptive. Rodriguez gestured toward Rex, who demonstrated his training by remaining perfectly still despite the courthouse's ambient noise. We've worked with 47 child witnesses across Arizona. Not once has Rex's presence been deemed prejudicial or disruptive by judges who've observed his work. The defense's turn came with surgical precision. Brennan rose like a predator sensing weakness. His decades of courtroom experience focused on dismantling this unprecedented accommodation. Your Honor, this so-called therapy is nothing more than emotional manipulation disguised as science. How can we ensure that this child's testimony reflects her actual memories rather than suggestions implanted during these therapy sessions? He paced before the bench, his voice rising with practiced indignation. The prosecution asks us to accept testimony from a psychologically compromised 3-year-old, whose only coherent statements have been made to a dog. Where's the reliability? Where's the constitutional protection for my client's right to confront a credible accuser? Brennan pulled out his own expert witness reports. Dr. William Crawford from Stanford University has reviewed this case and concluded that the child's trauma makes her testimony inherently unreliable. Adding an emotional crutch, like a therapy dog, only compounds the problem by creating artificial feelings of security that might lead to false confidence in inaccurate memories. The courtroom tension reached fever pitch as Judge Thompson called for a brief recess to observe Emma's interaction with Rex in real time. Court reporters stopped typing, cameras focused, and even the bailiffs leaned forward to witness history in the making. Emma sat motionless in the witness box until Rex padded closer, positioning himself where she could touch his fur without stretching. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly, Emma's hand reached out and rested on Rex's head. The change was visible to everyone in the courtroom. Her rigid posture softened, her breathing deepened, and for the first time since entering the building, she looked around the room with genuine awareness, rather than traumatized dissociation. "Hello, Emma," Judge Thompson said gently. "Can you tell me your name?" Emma's lips moved soundlessly at first, then in a whisper barely audible to the court reporter. "Emma Marie Williams." "And who is this with you?" the judge asked, gesturing toward Rex. "Rex," she said, her voice slightly stronger. "He's my friend. He keeps the scary thoughts away." The courtroom collectively held its breath as this traumatized child demonstrated the first clear communication she'd managed in weeks. Even Brennan's objections seemed to lose their force in the face of such poignant evidence. Judge Thompson studied the scene before him, a broken child, finding her voice through the presence of a gentle animal, trained to heal rather than harm. The constitutional questions remained complex, but the human reality was undeniable. Justice sometimes required innovation, even when precedent offered no clear guidance. The court will allow the therapy dog to remain present during the witness's testimony, Judge Thompson declared, his gavel falling like thunder in the silent courtroom. However, strict protocols will be observed. The animal will remain stationary, the handler will maintain appropriate distance, and any disruption will result in immediate removal. Cheers erupted from the gallery before being quickly silenced by the bailiff's stern glare. Legal history had been made, but the real test lay ahead. Emma Williams would have her chance to speak her truth, with Rex beside her to keep the scary thoughts at bay. Whether that truth would be enough to convict? Marcus Williams remained to be seen, but for the first time in weeks, justice seemed possible. The courtroom had never felt more like a cathedral than on this moment when 3-year-old Emma Williams prepared to testify in the most watched criminal trial in Arizona history. Every seat was filled with reporters, legal observers, and advocates who understood they were witnessing either the triumph of innovative justice or its spectacular failure. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as camera operators adjusted their lenses and court stenographers positioned their fingers over keys that would record words capable of changing a man's life forever. Emma entered through the side door wearing the same pale yellow dress from the previous day's hearing, her foster mother Sarah Davidson having dressed her with the care of someone preparing a child for the most important moment of her young life. But despite the gentle preparation, Emma's steps were hesitant, her small hand clutching her one-eyed teddy bear as if it were an anchor in a storm-tossed sea. Rex padded beside her with the measured gait of a professional, his therapy vest gleaming under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. Officer Jake Rodriguez maintained perfect control, his years of training evident in the seamless way he guided Rex to the designated position beside the witness stand. The German Shepherd's calm presence seemed to create an invisible barrier against the overwhelming atmosphere of the packed courtroom. Judge Robert Thompson watched the procession with the weight of legal history pressing down on his shoulders. In 30 years on the bench, he had never made a decision that would be scrutinized by constitutional scholars and replicated in law schools across the nation. His ruling to allow Rex's presence had already sparked debate in legal journals, and prompted emergency meetings and judicial conferences nationwide. As Emma settled into the witness chair, her feet dangling inches from the floor, the courtroom fell into a silence so complete that the building's air conditioning sounded like rushing wind. Rex positioned himself perfectly close enough for Emma to touch if needed, but not so close as to appear to be coaching or influencing her testimony. His intelligent brown eyes remained alert but peaceful, radiating the calm confidence that had made him exceptional at his work. District Attorney Lisa Hendricks approached the witness stand with the delicate care of someone handling the most fragile evidence. Her entire career had led to this moment, and she understood that her questioning technique could either unlock the truth or traumatize Emma further. The prosecution's case hung entirely on what the next few minutes would reveal. "Good morning, Emma," Lisa said, her voice gentle as a lullaby. "Can you tell us your name?" Emma's lips moved soundlessly at first, her eyes darting around the courtroom before settling on Rex's reassuring presence. The German shepherd's tail moved in the slightest wag, not enough to distract, but sufficient to encourage. "Emma Marie Williams," she whispered, her voice barely audible even with the courtroom's sophisticated sound system. "Emma, do you know why you're here today?" Lisa continued, maintaining the same soothing tone she might use with her own daughter. The little girl nodded slowly, then seemed to remember she needed to speak aloud. "To tell about the night Mommy got hurt." Her voice carried the mechanical quality of someone who had practiced these words with Dr. Chun, but underneath lay genuine emotion that no coaching could fabricate. In the gallery, Jessica Williams's sister clutched her husband's hand, tears streaming down her face as she heard Emma's voice for the first time since the attack. Jessica herself remained in long-term care, her traumatic brain injury preventing her from attending the trial that would determine her attacker's fate. "Emma, can you tell us what you saw that night?" Lisa asked, knowing this was the moment everything hinged upon. Emma's breathing quickened, and her grip tightened on her teddy bear. The courtroom monitors that Dr. Chun had insisted upon showed her stress levels spiking dangerously. For long minutes, she remained silent, her eyes growing wide with the same vacant stare that had haunted investigators for weeks. Michael Brennan leaned forward at the defense table, sensing victory within his grasp. His client, Marcus Williams, maintained his expression of grieving confusion, but those who watched closely caught the flash of satisfaction in his eyes. Without Emma's testimony, the circumstantial evidence would never convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt. Rex seemed to sense Emma's rising distress. Without moving from his position, he somehow projected an aura of protection that was visible to everyone in the courtroom. His breathing remained steady and audible, providing a rhythmic comfort that seemed to anchor Emma to the present moment. Then, in a gesture that would be replayed on news programs around the world, Emma leaned down toward Rex's ear. The courtroom strained to hear, microphones capturing only the faintest whisper of a traumatized child sharing secrets with the one being she trusted completely. Rex's ears swiveled forward, and his gentle eyes seemed to acknowledge whatever she had told him. "What did you tell Rex?" Lisa asked softly, understanding instinctively that this moment was crucial. Emma straightened slowly, her small face transforming, as if Rex had somehow absorbed her fear and given her courage in return. When she looked up at Lisa, her eyes held a clarity that hadn't been present since the night of the attack. "I told him about the scary sounds," Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "The breaking glass, Mommy screaming, Daddy's angry voice getting louder and louder." The courtroom collectively held its breath as Emma continued, her testimony flowing now like water through a broken dam. "I hid behind the couch when Daddy started hitting Mommy. She tried to run away, but he grabbed her hair and threw her down. There was so much blood." Brennan shot to his feet, his objection dying on his lips as Judge Thompson's stern gaze silenced him. This was testimony that had taken weeks to unlock, and the court would hear every word. "Emma," Lisa said gently, "who hurt your mommy?" Emma looked directly across the courtroom at Marcus Williams, her 3-year-old face showing a wisdom no child should possess. Her voice, when it came, was crystal clear and absolutely certain. "Daddy hurt Mommy. He made her stop moving." The courtroom erupted, despite Judge Thompson's calls for order. Marcus Williams lunged toward the witness stand before bailiffs restrained him, his mask of innocence finally slipping to reveal the rage beneath. "She's lying," he screamed. "That little brat doesn't know what she's talking about." But Emma didn't flinch. With Rex beside her, she had found her voice and spoken her truth. The 2 words she had whispered to Rex, "Daddy hurt," had unlocked a testimony that would change everything. As the bailiffs restored order, and Marcus was led away in handcuffs. For his outburst, Emma reached down to stroke Rex's fur one more time. "Thank you," she whispered to her 4-legged protector, her words carrying the weight of justice finally served. The jury deliberation room had never witnessed such profound silence. 12 citizens of Maricopa County sat around the oval table, each grappling with the weight of what they had just heard from the lips of a 3-year-old girl whose courage had shattered a carefully constructed web of lies. The foreman, a retired teacher named Margaret Collins, stared at the evidence photos spread before them, images of blood spatter, defensive wounds, and broken furniture that now told a cohesive story, thanks to Emma Williams's devastating testimony. "I've been teaching children for 35 years, Margaret said quietly, breaking the contemplative silence. "I know when a child is telling the truth." That little girl wasn't coached or manipulated. She was remembering something that happened to her, something that changed her life forever. Juror number 7, construction worker David Martinez, nodded grimly. When she looked at Marcus Williams and said, "Daddy hurt Mommy," you could see in her eyes that she was reliving that night. No 3-year-old could fake that kind of pain. He shuffled through the timeline evidence, comparing Marcus's alibi with Emma's testimony. The timestamps don't lie either. He left Murphy's bar at 10:15. The neighbor heard screaming at 10:30. Gives him just enough time to get home and ... The unfinished sentence hung in the air like a verdict already rendered. The physical evidence that had seemed circumstantial before Emma's testimony now formed an unbreakable chain of proof. Blood spatter patterns consistent with blunt force. Trauma. Jessica's defensive wounds matching the timeline. The neighbor's eyewitness account of Marcus carrying an unconscious body to his car and returning alone 20 minutes later. Outside the courthouse, the media circus had reached unprecedented proportions. CNN legal analyst Sarah Thompson stood before a bank of cameras, trying to capture the magnitude of what had just occurred. What we witnessed today represents a seismic shift in how American courts accommodate vulnerable witnesses. Emma Williams's testimony, facilitated by therapy dog Rex, may have just changed legal proceeding forever. The ripple effects were already being felt across the country. Law. Schools were hastily organizing symposiums on animal-assisted testimony. Children's advocacy groups were flooding legislatures with proposed bills inspired by Emma's law. Defense attorneys were forming task forces to challenge what they saw as emotionally manipulative courtroom theater, while prosecutors were studying Officer Rodriguez's training protocols for their own K-9 programs. Back in the jury room, the deliberation had shifted from whether Marcus Williams was guilty to what degree of culpability they would assign. The evidence painted a picture of escalating domestic violence that had reached its horrific climax on that October night. Financial records showed Marcus had been gambling heavily, losing construction contracts due to his increasingly erratic behavior. Neighbors testified about hearing arguments that had grown more frequent and violent over the past year. "The premeditation question troubles me," admitted juror number 3, accountant Linda Chun. This seems like it escalated from an argument, not a planned murder attempt. Does it matter? Responded juror number 9, nurse practitioner James Williams. He nearly killed her. If Emma hadn't been there to witness it, if that neighbor hadn't called 911 when she did, Jessica Williams would be dead. The intent was clear from the moment he threw her down those stairs. Inside the courthouse's victim witness room, Dr. Amanda Chun sat with Emma and her foster mother Sarah Davidson, monitoring the child's psychological state after her groundbreaking testimony. Emma seemed remarkably calm, coloring in a book while Rex lay beside her chair, his gentle presence continuing to provide the emotional anchor that had made her testimony possible. "How do you feel, sweetheart?" Dr. Chun asked gently. Emma looked up from her coloring book, her eyes clearer than they had been in months. "I told the truth about Daddy hurting Mommy. Rex helped me be brave." She reached down to pat the German shepherd's head. "Will Mommy get better now?" The question hung in the air, highlighting the cruel reality that while justice might be served, some wounds might never fully heal. Jessica Williams remained in long-term rehabilitation, her traumatic brain injury requiring months or years of recovery. The vibrant woman who had once filled her home with laughter might never fully return, even if her attacker faced consequences for his crimes. At 4:17 p.m., after 3 hours and 42 minutes of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict. The bailiff's call echoed through the courthouse corridors. All parties returned to courtroom 7A. The assembled crowd, journalists, legal observers, domestic violence advocates, and curious citizens filed in with the solemnity of people witnessing history. Marcus Williams sat at the defense table, his earlier outburst having cost him any remaining sympathy from the jury. His expensive suit couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes as he faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. Beside him, Michael Brennan maintained professional composure despite knowing his case had crumbled the moment Emma Williams found her voice. Judge Robert Thompson called for order as the jury filed in, their faces betraying nothing of the momentous decision they carried. The foreman, Margaret Collins, stood with the verdict form in her trembling hands, understanding that her next words would echo through legal history. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of attempted murder. In the first degree, how do you find?" The courtroom held its collective breath as Margaret Collins looked directly at Marcus Williams. "We find the defendant guilty." The word guilty seemed to explode through the courtroom like a physical force. Gasps, sobs, and scattered applause erupted before Judge Thompson's gavel restored order. Marcus Williams slumped in his chair, as if the weight of justice had physically crushed him, while across the courtroom, Jessica Williams's family embraced through tears of relief and vindication. "On the charge of aggravated domestic violence, how do you find?" "Guilty, Your Honor." "On the charge of child endangerment, how do you find?" "Guilty on all counts, Your Honor." As the verdicts continued, Emma Williams sat in the victim witness room, unaware that her courage had just changed legal history. She continued coloring her picture, a house with a family standing in front, a big dog beside them, and a sun shining down on everyone. In her 3-year-old mind, she had simply told the truth about the night her world shattered. But in doing so, she had proven that justice could prevail when innovation met courage, when therapy met testimony, and when a little girl and a German shepherd decided that some truths were too important to remain silent. The ripple effects would continue for years to come, changing how courts across America treated their most vulnerable witnesses. But for now, justice had been served. 2 years after the verdict that changed legal history, Emma Williams ran through the sprawling Centennial Park in Colorado Springs with the unbridled joy of a healthy 5-year-old discovering the world anew. Her laughter echoed across the playground, a sound that would have seemed impossible to anyone who remembered the silent, traumatized child who had once sat frozen in an Arizona courtroom. The mountain air carried her giggles toward the bench, where her mother Jessica sat watching, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Jessica Williams bore the physical scars of that terrible October night, a slight tremor in her left hand, occasional headaches that reminded her of the traumatic brain injury that had nearly claimed her life. But the deeper wounds had healed. Through months of rehabilitation, therapy, and the unwavering love of her daughter and new fiancé, David Chun, a pediatric nurse she had met during her recovery. David understood trauma, understood healing, and most importantly, understood that some families were born from circumstances rather than blood. "Mama, watch me," Emma called from the top of the slide, her voice strong and clear, carrying none of the hesitation that had once marked her speech. She wore a purple dress decorated with dogs' German shepherds, specifically a testament to the four-legged hero who had helped her find her voice when the world needed to hear it most. Ripple effects of Emma's testimony had spread far beyond that Phoenix courtroom. Across the country, 37 states had now passed versions of Emma's law, formally recognizing the rights of child witnesses to testify with certified therapy animals present. Law enforcement agencies from California to Maine had established canine therapy programs modeled after Officer Jake Rodriguez's pioneering work. Children who might otherwise have been silenced by trauma were finding their voices through the gentle presence of specially trained dogs. In Phoenix, the original canine therapy program had expanded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. What began as an experimental collaboration between Officer Rodriguez and Arizona State University had grown into a nationally recognized center of excellence. Rex, now 6 years old and a celebrity in law enforcement circles, had helped 43 additional children testify in court proceedings. His success rate was remarkable. Every child he worked with eventually found the courage to speak their truth. The program's waiting list stretched months into the future, with requests coming from prosecutors, child advocacy centers, and even defense attorneys who had initially opposed the concept. The legal community had learned what Dr. Amanda Chun had known from the beginning, that helping traumatized children communicate wasn't about manipulating testimony, but about removing barriers that prevented truth from being heard. Detective Sarah Martinez, now promoted to captain of the Domestic Violence Unit, often spoke at conferences about the Williams case. She carried photos of Emma from that first terrible night and from recent updates, a visual reminder of what healing could accomplish when innovation met compassion. The little girl who had once sat silent in a corner now danced at school recitals, played soccer with neighborhood friends, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian so she could help animals, the way Rex had helped her. Marcus Williams began serving his 25-year sentence at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence, his appeals exhausted after the Supreme Court declined to hear his case. The guilty verdicts had held through every challenge, establishing precedent that therapy animal accommodation for child witnesses did not violate defendants' constitutional rights. His story had become a cautionary tale in domestic violence prevention programs, though Emma rarely thought about him anymore. In her 5-year-old mind, he had become part of a bad dream that Rex had helped chase away. The Colorado autumn painted the mountains in brilliant oranges and golds as Emma raced back to the bench where Jessica and David waited. "Mama, can we visit Rex soon?" she asked, climbing into Jessica's lap with the casual affection of a child who had learned that love was reliable again. "We're flying to Phoenix next month for the dedication ceremony," Jessica reminded her, smoothing Emma's dark hair. The new National Center for Child Witness Advocacy was being named in honor of Emma's courage, though the little girl was more excited about seeing Rex than about any ceremony in her honor. The dedication would bring together everyone who had played a role in that groundbreaking case. Judge Robert Thompson, now retired, would deliver the keynote address about innovation in jurisprudence. District Attorney Lisa Hendricks, recently elected to Congress on a platform of children's rights, would speak about the importance of listening to survivors. Dr. Amanda Chun would present research showing that child witnesses testified with greater accuracy and less trauma when therapy animals were present. But for Emma, the real celebration would be the moment she could wrap her arms around Rex's neck and whisper her gratitude into his patient ears. She had written him a letter dictated to David in her careful 5-year-old language telling him about her new school, her soccer team, and the puppy they were planning to adopt from the local shelter. "Dear Rex," the letter began, "thank you for helping me be brave when I was scared. You taught me that telling the truth is important, even when it's hard. I want to help other kids like you helped me. Maybe someday I can work with dogs too, and we can help more children find their voices." As the sun set behind the Colorado mountains, Emma fell asleep in the car on the way home, her head resting against Jessica's shoulder. The nightmares that had once plagued her sleep were gone, replaced by dreams of running through fields with dogs, who understood that some heroes walked on 4 legs and that courage could be shared between species. The Williams family had found their new beginning, built on the foundation of truth that a 3-year-old girl and a German shepherd had courageously constructed in an Arizona courtroom. Their story had changed American law, protected countless children, and proven that justice could prevail when innovation met compassion. In the end, Emma Williams had done more than survive her trauma. She had transformed it into hope for every child who would come after her, ensuring that no young witness would ever have to face their fears alone. 2 words whispered to a therapy. Dog had indeed changed everything, creating ripples of justice that would protect vulnerable voices for generations to come. The scary thoughts were finally gone, replaced by a future bright with possibility and the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful testimony comes from the smallest witnesses when they're given the courage to speak their truth.